Welcome to another broadcast of Truth Be Told, where we believe in experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and today we're going to have a great show for you guys. We have Dr. Michael Salla, who is a pioneer in the development of exopolitics, the political study of key actors, institutions, and processes associated with extraterrestrial life. He has a new book out titled The U.S. Navy's Secret Space Program and the Nordic Extraterrestrial Alliance. We're going to talk about the Trump administration, what is under the Antarctica, and what did the Nazis discover? And was President Kennedy assassinated because he was going to share the truth about UFOs and extraterrestrial visitations? I know that perked your interest, so you got to stick around for this show. So please welcome to Truth Be Told, where we believe in experience becomes truth, Dr. Michael Salla, author of the book, The U.S. Navy's Secret Space Program and the Nordic Extraterrestrial Alliance. Welcome to Truth Be Told.
Aloha, Tony.
Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. How you doing, sir?
Well, that's great. That's quite an audience you got there.
I know, right? Well, they heard you were going to be here, and I could not stop them. I mean, they just kept coming and coming. I had to get a bouncer.
Right.
Well, first of all, I'm jealous because you live in Hawaii. So even though, of course, I live in California, where most people are jealous of me, at least for the weather, but Hawaii is such a beautiful place. So congrats on that.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful place, and it's a wonderful day today, and it's an ideal place to do the research I do, which often does kind of touch on really difficult topics. To live in a beautiful place, it gives you a way of just kind of breaking that energy flow.
Right, I was going to say you need that balance. So, well, okay,
yep,
let's ask this. I want to get into where you grew up and how you got started, but I just want to, for those people out there that want to know, what's exopolitics? What is that?
Well, right. Well, I was a professor in international politics, and in 2001, I came across this evidence that Stephen Greer had accumulated through his disclosure project,
right,
that when we understand the big picture of what's happening around the planet, we need to factor in this kind of cover-up of UFOs and extraterrestrial life. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And I realized that, being a teacher and a researcher of international politics, I realized that this was just international politics with a kind of extraterrestrial dimension thrown in. And so I thought, well, what's an appropriate way of describing that? And I thought, well, exopolitics would be how you describe it, just as in the field of biology, there's a topic called exobiology, and so I thought, well, the same thing with political science. When we're talking about extraterrestrial life and how that impacts on international politics, then we're talking about exopolitics.
And I mean, it's one of those words that just roll off the tongue. So you knew it had to stick. So yeah, it does roll off the tongue. So you said you're from Australia. What part?
I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and travelled and did my studies in other cities like Melbourne, and taught in Brisbane, and also taught in Canberra, Australia. And then in 1996, I got a job at American University in Washington, D.C., and I was teaching there and researching there for 8 years.
Oh, and I always say anybody dealing with extraterrestrial aliens, whatever you want to call them, majority, I'm not saying all, but the majority of the people have had an experience, from a visual sighting, an abduction. But what perked your interest in?
Well, for me, it was very much an intellectual awakening. In 2001, I was really trying to understand, what is really driving international politics, and in particular, international conflict, because that was my specialty.
Right.
I went to places, trouble spots like Kosovo, Sri Lanka, East Timor, which were war zones, and I was trying to find out, well, what is it that drives these conflicts so that I could try and encourage peaceful outcomes to those.
Right.
And in 2001, I was looking for kind of a deeper analysis for, how is it that these conflicts keep on perpetuating themselves? And so that's when I came across Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project press conference, and when I watched the video, I realized that this was giving me a lot of the answers to the questions I was asking. And I actually showed it in one of my classes. The first class I showed it in was the theory of conflict, violence, and war, which was a graduate class in the School of International Service at American University. And
Right.
I got the students to kind of like debate with me whether Stephen Greer's whistleblowers were making sense or whether they were just contriving everything.
And how did that go over? What was majority of the thought of this from the students?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that question. I was really shocked. I thought the students would be very open to this kind of perspective, but I found the vast majority. I mean, it was a graduate class of 25 students, and out of those 25 students, 23 of them either thought that the whistleblowers were lying,
Really?
or were in the middle. Only 2 of the 25 students thought that the whistleblowers were telling the truth and that this was really going on. So I was shocked by that, because this was a liberal progressive class. This was a class of people that, for example, all of them would have voted for Obama or Bernie Sanders
Right.
in the last election.
Yeah.
So it gives you an idea of very progressive, but they really thought that this stuff was a lot of nonsense. I was shocked by that, but I really thought, along with the minority of students, that this was very serious and something that needed to be understood.
Let me ask you this, and if you can even remember, but were those, you said two students, correct?
Yeah, 2. Yeah.
Were they average students?
Oh, I don't remember who they were, but my guess would be that they were, probably the brighter ones of the class.
Oh, really? Because sometimes I find the reason I find that the very intelligent people have more. I mean, I'm not saying that I could be completely wrong. I'm more of an average. I was more of a B, C student, but I was more open to more ideas and to different creative minds, where a lot of times when you're very intelligent, you kind of get a closed mind unless you have the evidence. So I was just curious.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I would agree with that. But as I said, I don't remember who they were.
Right.
They don't kind of stand out in my mind. So maybe, with retrospect, maybe I have to take that back, because they don't stand out in my mind. Maybe they weren't, the top students in the class. But I just remember it was only 2 out of 25, and that was a shock to me.
Yeah, that is a shock. Okay, so when you okay, well, let's move forward, because I know time will get away from us. Let's move forward a bit. And so when you started doing your research and of your own, what really started motivating, and not just listening to somebody else's research and reading the material, but what really started motivating you once you started doing your own research? Was there anything that you found that really was like this there's something to this?
Oh, yeah. Well, it was the thing that really grabbed my attention were all of these whistleblower testimonies saying that agreements had been reached between different administrations, and in particular the Eisenhower administration and extraterrestrial civilizations. And that really hooked me, because, my background was in international politics, and also kind of second-track diplomacy, as we called it, in the field of international conflict resolution. So
Right.
my work was to actually train students to be citizen diplomats, that we would look at kind of different methods of conducting galactic diplomacy or conducting international diplomacy with an emphasis on complementing or assisting first-track diplomacy, which is official diplomacy. And so when I came across this material that President Eisenhower had secretly met with and had reached agreements with different extraterrestrial civilizations, it was like that grabbed me, and that got me really thinking about, well, what is the implications of all of this if if you've got the president of the most powerful nation on the planet reaching agreement with extraterrestrial visitors, and none of this is disclosed, that was something I felt needed a lot of attention and study.
So I'm going to go back a little bit further, because I know the Eisenhower, and I've interviewed, Laura Eisenhower before, but did you go even further back and do any research? Because I could be wrong, but I thought I remember even George Washington having an encounter with supposedly, a vision, but a lot of people, thought it possibly could have been extraterrestrial aliens that showed him the future of America. Have you ever heard about that?
Yes, I have heard of that, and I read about Washington's kind of vision of the future, and these kind of mysterious incidents in terms of how the Constitution was passed, and Washington himself being held at critical points. I find that fascinating, but that wasn't the thing that I was focusing on, because from the very beginning, I was very interested in whistleblower testimony.
Okay.
First of all, Greer's group of 21 whistleblowers in that Disclosure Project press conference. And then I began finding these different whistleblowers on the internet who had been interviewed, or I was able to track some of them down and then interview them myself. And as I did that over the years, I was able to put more and more material together. But certainly, that was what got me interested in that, because that was always my kind of specialty. When I went and did the field work in places like Kosovo or Sri Lanka or East Timor, I always interviewed people. I always, asked them, well, what's going on? What's the story here? And that's how I kind of got my image, or, developed a big picture overview of what's going on in a particular conflict. And I was doing the same thing when it came to this kind of exopolitics field.
So when you, because whistleblowing it's one of those touchy subjects, because you never want to step too far over the line, because then you're always afraid that they may come after you. But what was the first person that you've ever sat down with when it comes to whistleblowing with a government, and it doesn't even have to be with the United States, with a government, and what was your encounter with them? What was the first one? You don't have to even give names, but what was the first one that you got to sit down with and talk to them?
Sure. Well, one of the first ones was Clifford Stone, who worked for the U.S. Army for 22 years, and he basically says that he was involved in these crash retrieval operations. And so he would describe how he was called and performed in these. But one of the things that kind of really I found fascinating about him, which kind of matched what I had been finding when I was doing my own field work in these trouble spots, was that he said, as we're talking, they are listening to me, and he said, when I hang up with you, some people are going to come into my room, and they're going to beat me up because
really
I told you too much, and that resonated with me, because I remember the same thing happening. When I was doing my field work, I remember in East Timor, when I went to East Timor, basically the same thing was happening. I was talking to a Catholic priest, and he was saying, I'm telling you all these things, but if you look across from here, there's a Indonesian guy looking at me, and when you leave, he's going to come in here with some of his friends, and they're going to give me a rough time, over me talking to you and telling you what's really going on here.
So why do you think, what was their motivation to actually open up with you anyway, if they knew that was going to happen?
Well, I think that these people reach a point in their lives when they embrace the truth and see that the truth is much more important than their own personal safety. So they become kind of martyrs to the cause. And there's a lot of people like that. Who sacrifice the truth to their own personal safety because they've reached a point in their lives where they just feel that it's important to do this. And Clifford Stone, he's one of the heroes in the field, because he did this, and he says that because he was doing this, that he paid a pretty big price. That he said they killed his son for doing this.
Wow.
That he had I think his son was like 19 years old, and his son died in a kind of quote mysterious car accident. And he says he knew exactly what happened. That he had been threatened. That if he was to talk about this, that he would pay a heavy price. And that's what happened. That his son died, and he decided he would keep going, even though he has other children. He kept going, and he kind of that really struck with me that this is the kind of person you're talking about. That truth is so important to them that they don't care. They reach a certain point where it's like they're personally threatened, their family are threatened, and they pay a big price, and they keep doing it. And the same thing happens with others who are involved in getting the truth out.
So, Sergeant Clifford Stone, could you tell us during that interview that you talked with him? I know he had viewed scenes from an alien autopsy. Could you give us a little more details for our audience about what he saw and what his take of why we were doing? And I mean, was this a alien that they found dead? Did they find it alive? Could you give us a little more details on that?
Sure. Well, he was part of a covert team who was sent to these crash retrieval sites where a UFO crashed, and so he was the first response team. So he went in there, and his job was to kind of find out whether any of the aliens had survived, and if some had survived, to communicate with them. And he describes going into, I think he said he went into, over the course of the 22 years, I think he said there were 12 cases or 12 crash retrieval operations where he went in and there were bodies, and sometimes some of the aliens were alive.
Really?
And so he described, so he would describe communicating with them, and what happened when the kind of the next wave of teams came in to kind of sanitize the area, to remove any live aliens, to remove any of the dead aliens. That he was trained in kind of like giving first aid to the aliens, so that any were injured, that he would help them, so that they would be alive, because the military wanted to retrieve these aliens and find out what's going on. But yes, some were dead, and so they were taken away for autopsies. And
so, did he ever say where these bodies are still at, or did I'm sure we didn't expose of them, so because I'm sure we needed them for some other experiment. Did he say where they were located?
He said that these bodies were the crash retrieval operations that he was involved in basically emanated out of Fort Belvoir in Virginia. And that from Fort Belvoir, Fort Detrick, I believe it is quite close, and that's where the Army and the Air Force does a lot of their kind of like top secret studies in terms of alien viruses and so forth. So that would have been the place where they would have stored the alien bodies to study them, because you have to create a highly sanitized quarantine area that's very secure for the studying of these alien bodies and conducting autopsies, because they were also studying the bodies in terms of being able to see if they could develop any kind of biological warfare viruses out of these bodies. So Fort Belvoir and Fort Detrick in Virginia was where a lot of this stuff was happening.
I'm going to go back a little bit further into the Hitler and the Nazis, because that's, for some reason, I'm so fascinated with World War II. I can watch documentaries all day long, but I want to know. I want to talk a little bit about Nazis in the Antarctica. And I know you've talked about this probably many times, but I'm still fascinated that the Nazis even, went down to the Antarctica and established a presence there. And could you go into a little more details about why do you think they established a presence there, and what did they find?
Well, this is something that has been around for a long time. A lot of people, whistleblowers, have been saying that the Nazis did escape down to Antarctica. And, of course, we know there's a lot of historical documents that talk about the Nazis establishing bases down there in 1938-39, and that Admiral Byrd led a number of naval expeditions down there, beginning in 1939, 1940, under the Roosevelt administration, and in Operation High Jump. So there's long been kind of stories about what happened down there. That Byrd's naval expedition under Operation High Jump was attacked by fleets of flying saucers that came out of the water. Those stories began to gain a lot more credence in what was it? I think 1991, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, when the KGB released its files. And some of these files talked about Operation High Jump and basically confirmed that, yes, the ships were attacked by flying saucers that were coming out of the water. And more recently, there have been whistleblower statements by people like Corey Good and also William Tompkins, that I've been working with both of them pretty closely, that go into a much more detail into what was happening down in Antarctica.
And have we? Didn't after the war? Didn't the U.S. Establish, pretty much take over what the Nazis had started their work? Didn't we make a presence there?
Well, this is the thing is that during World War II, the Nazis had established a couple of space programs or flying saucer programs. One was in occupied Europe, and their goal was to weaponize these for the war effort. And they established another one which was more advanced, and the goal of that one was not so much weaponizing it for the war effort, but to develop functional spacecraft that could go interplanetary and eventually interstellar. So at the end of the Second World War, under Operation Paperclip, they were, the United States and Britain and Russia were able to extract a lot of technologies and Nazi scientists that were involved in the unsuccessful weaponization program in Europe.
Right.
But the scientists and the resources that were involved in Antarctica, they didn't get their hands on any of that because all of that was transported during the war down to Antarctica, and so that the most advanced flying saucer programs are all down in Antarctica. So that by the time the U.S. Were able to send a naval armada down to Antarctica, which was in 1946-47, it was too late because the Nazis had time to weaponize their fleets down in Antarctica. And we know from what the KGB files said and what the whistleblowers have said that the flying saucers down in Antarctica were now advanced enough to basically defeat any of the ships, any of the jets that the U.S. had at the time, and so the U.S. didn't have the best stuff. The best stuff was down there in Antarctica, and that's where the Germans, kind of like got way ahead in these anti-gravity flying saucer technologies.
And I find it fascinating because I know up till I believe, and I could be wrong, President Nixon. I've heard the stories about him taking Jackie Gleason to visit a base down in, I believe, Florida, and showing him alien bodies there. But after that, I've not really heard of a president meeting face to face. I mean, you could tell me if I'm wrong, but in your book, Kennedy's Last Stand, when President Clinton took over, you wrote, most of us know that knowledge, that he asked for two things: is who killed JFK, and also are there UFOs? I want to ask you about JFK, because I love JFK. I think he's a fascinating man. But I've had many people on talking about his assassination. From the mob killed him, Cuba killed him, the Russians killed him. Did you have any whistleblowers that really talked about the truth about JFK? Was he going to expose the UFO phenomena, or no?
Well, I think what Kennedy really was trying to do was he was trying to assert direct presidential control over the whole UFO extraterrestrial issue.
Right.
That was his primary goal, so that the president could get oversight of this again, because this was what President Eisenhower had learned was that he had made a big mistake, that by delegating to this appointed committee,
right.
MJ-12, all of the authority for running these programs, that the president was quickly cut out of the loop. And of course, Eisenhower was a five-star general, and so they had a lot of trouble cutting Eisenhower out of the loop, because ultimately he had to threaten to invade Area 51 with the U.S. First Army, and that's how he was able to kind of at least get in the loop as to what was going on. But when Kennedy became president, they just shut Kennedy out completely. And so Kennedy was locked into this struggle to try and get authority or try and get oversight into what was really going on. And because Kennedy knew a lot of information about this, because Kennedy during the Second World War and after the Second World War was close friends with the Secretary of the Navy and became the first Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal. And Forrestal took Kennedy to Germany and basically introduced him to a lot of the Germans' secret advanced programs. And so Kennedy knew it. So when he became president, he wanted to assert presidential control, and he had to come up with all of these different strategies to try and do it. And at the very end, I think because he was making progress, that's what triggered the assassination.
Wow. I mean, that totally makes sense of why he was assassinated, because they do not want to lose control. And I'm looking at some of the pictures of the Majestic 12. Did any of the Majestic 12 come forward, or have any family members come forward and whistleblow about some of the truth of extraterrestrials? There
are some of the people that were involved in key aspects of the Majestic 12 operations. One is James Jesus Angleton, who was the head of the CIA's counterintelligence division,
right.
From around 1953 right up until around 1972-73. And what happened when he died? A lot of his papers, a lot of the classified files that he had accumulated were leaked. And amongst those files was a leaked document, basically had him that referred to him basically having these majestic directives that were applied to Kennedy's request to have the CIA's classified UFO files shared with NASA. This was the trigger. This was the thing that triggered the Kennedy assassination, that on November 12, 1963, 10 days before the assassination, Kennedy requested the CIA director at the time, John McCone, to share with NASA all of the CIA's classified UFO files. And McCone asked Angleton, what do I do here? And what he was told was that William Colby was the kind of middleman here. William Colby told McCone that Angleton has the MJ directives, and this was signed by Colby on November 20, 1963, 2 days before the assassination, basically telling McCone, "Don't worry, Angleton has the directives. He's going to look after this." and 2 days later, Kennedy's assassinated. And so that's a smoking gun document that came out of the archives that Angleton had that were leaked after his death in 1973, 74, whenever that happened.
Fascinating. And is it because Nixon knew so much about the alien and like you said, apparently, according to Jackie Gleason, is it because he was the vice president of Eisenhower? Is that, or not Eisenhower? Was it Eisenhower or Truman? I can't remember now. But was it because he was the vice president? Is that how he had more access to the information than majority of the presidents after him?
Exactly, yes. Eisenhower was a very busy man, so what he did was he delegated to Nixon the responsibility for keeping oversight in what was going on these operations. Mm-hmm. And so Nixon was the guy that was being briefed on what Majestic 12 was doing. And so Nixon was part of the process by which Eisenhower threatened Majestic 12 that they didn't share the files, that Area 51 would be invaded by the First Army. So Nixon was privy to all of that. So when he became president, of course, he knew that the real history of what was going on, and so there was, I think, an effort by Nixon to kind of like get control of this, or at least get oversight again of this, and I think that was a direct factor in why it was that the Watergate burglary was so bungled, because Nixon was set up. Because the Majestic 12 team wanted to have something over Nixon to blackmail him, and and Watergate was the way they did it.
That's fascinating. That's great. And did you get to, is this information from a whistleblower then?
Yeah, there's quite a few people that have talked about this. Roger Stone wrote a book about it, how the CIA was involved in basically setting Nixon up, that this was a setup. According to Roger Stone's analysis, he doesn't kind of look at it in terms of an extraterrestrial cover-up. He looks at it in terms of the kind of the deep state, those deep state actors that wanted to remove Nixon because he knew too much. He knew where all the bodies were buried. Nixon knew why Kennedy was assassinated. I think that's why Stone basically said that Nixon was prepared to have a lot of the Kennedy files released, and that this was the kind of like the trigger for the Majestic 12 group or the deep state to remove Nixon, and so they kind of like rolled out the whole the Watergate thing. But more recent whistleblowers have said that yes, it was because Nixon knew about why Kennedy was really killed, that Nixon knew about the whole Nazi involvement and the extraterrestrial cover. He just knew too much. And so, when he didn't cooperate with the deep state, with the Majestic 12 group, they just rolled out the whole kind of Watergate impeachment scenario, and that people like Kissinger were very deeply involved in setting Nixon up.
Really? This is, wow. I have not heard this information, so I'm really enjoying this. So we're talking about a lot of whistleblowers, from about the Majestic 12, the 50s, 60s, maybe even 70s. What is some of the more recent whistleblowers? Are you getting whistleblowers that are current talking about the politics of today and connection with the UFO extraterrestrials? Because, like I said, we get to hear a lot about, from the past, but what about today? In the day political through Clinton, clear up to here now with Trump. I mean, are you getting anybody talking at the moment?
I am, yes. I'm working with several whistleblowers that are very much involved in contemporary developments concerning secret space programs and efforts to have these disclosed to the public. That basically there are multiple space programs. One is run by the Air Force, and one is run by the Navy. And that the Air Force doesn't know about the Navy program.
Oh, they don't?
Because the Navy program, they don't. This is part of the compartmentalization process, whereas the Navy knows more about the Air Force program, because the Navy's program is much more advanced and operates in deep space. But that the Navy wants the truth to come out. They want these programs to be revealed, because there's real national security threats posed by keeping these secrets for much longer. And so there's a whole kind of struggle now behind the scenes over how much to reveal and when. But basically what I'm being told by the whistleblowers that I'm working with is that there is a broad agreement to disclose the existence of these programs, which is why the whistleblowers are allowed to come forward and talk about these.
Oh, really?
And this is why, you go back to 2001 and why Stephen Greer was successful with his disclosure project was because both the Air Force and the Navy were on board, that they wanted this information to come out because this is the time for the general public to get up to speed. But the debate is, how much to reveal and how to skew it so that, that the information can kind of strengthen. Because ultimately it comes down to dollars. It comes down to, who's going to get the money to be able to fund the next generation of deep space craft or deep or underwater kind of bases and programs. So it's all about money, and the more you can reveal to the public, the more money you can get to continue your programs, and you don't want to lose control. So, neither the military services, the Air Force or the Navy, wants to lose control to the civilian sector, but they want more money to be able to kind of build bigger and better craft. So disclosing the truth, or some of it, is going to help them achieve that agenda.
And this is, discussed in, I'm sure, in your recent book, the U.S. Navy's Secret Space Program and Nordic Extraterrestrial Alliance. I'm curious, what's your thoughts? It's hard to sometimes even think about what the Trump administration is, because there's not really been a complete focus. So what do you think with the new administration and with the secret space programs, with extraterrestrials? How do you feel that Trump will help move this forward from the exposure, or do you feel like this could be put on the back burner while he's president?
Well, I think that Trump is someone that is really focused on establishing a legacy for himself as a great president that basically restored America's manufacturing capacities. So this is something, basically he's interested in reindustrializing the United States. And I think he is someone that will be open to any programs that can achieve those goals. And I think that the people that want to get more funding for these secret space programs, they see Trump as someone that could help them achieve those goals. And so from what I've been told, he's been given some of this information about these secret space programs and about the advanced technologies that are possible to be developed. And so this is one of the things that I think Trump is very much interested in doing. And so, for example, I was told that one of the things that Trump did was that he issued a secret memorandum to the Department of Defense pretty early on in his administration. We're talking about January 21st, 22nd, kind of like, only days after the inauguration, where he requested the Department of Defense to basically lift their secrecy orders against over 1,000 patents that have been held up because they deal with advanced technologies concerning anti-gravity, health, anti-aging, all of these kind of really futuristic technologies that have been held up because of secrecy orders, that he wants all of those released. Because what he wants to do is to basically have these patents released, or have these secrecy orders released, so that the patents can then be approved, and then they come out into the public arena, and then you can have basically a revolution in the transportation industry, in the health industry, in the kind of material sciences industry, in the biochemistry industries, so that you can have like flying cars that are built using free energy technologies. You can have the health industry reformed or revolutionized with kind of like electromagnetic healing technology.
Right.
That you can have material sciences reformed, so that all of a sudden you can have aircraft built that that weigh only a few pounds rather than a few tons. So these are the things that he's wanting to have move forward, and you actually see this. You get a hint of this in his inauguration speech. Towards the end of that speech, he said something that a lot of the mainstream media kind of glossed over, but is very significant. And he said, quote, "We stand at the birth of a new millennium, ready to unlock the mysteries of space, to free the Earth from the miseries of disease, and to harness the energies, industries, and technologies of tomorrow." End quote. Trump wants to basically bring about a revolution in these kind of like advanced technology sectors. And I think that's why he's been given support by the military especially, which is why he's surrounded himself with a lot of military people.
Right, and I have noticed that he's one of the first in many, many years to actually have so much military around him. In the last 30 years, we only have about 5 minutes left, and I can't believe it's gone so fast, but in the last 30 years, do you think Trump will be one of the presidents that really pushed this to the forefront, or has there been other presidents that go into the office, through people you've talked to, that really had an agenda to really open this up from the the space programs to revealing the truth about extraterrestrials, and then the establishment, or even if you go even deeper into the true government, that have put a damper on that? Is there other presidents that you feel, and like even Trump, that you feel that started their presidency by wanting to do all this, but then the true government was like, no?
Exactly. Well, the most recent president that tried to do this was Obama. He kind of like followed Hillary. So he followed Bill Clinton's kind of efforts to try to get to the bottom of this issue, and Obama did try. I mean, we know that because one of his senior advisors, John Podesta, actually admitted just before the presidential, before he became Hillary Clinton's campaign chair, that he had tried under the Obama administration to get this stuff declassified, that he had failed miserably. So Obama tried and failed. Why he failed? Well, we can go into that, but I think that basically, I think that they had a control file on Obama. The deep state could control him. I don't. Trump is controllable. I think he is the wild card, because I think they threw everything they could at him during the election to get Hillary Clinton elected, and it didn't work. So I don't think that they control Trump. I think Trump deeply distrusts the deep state and resents them, because he knows what they tried to do to him, during the campaign and have Hillary elected. So I think Trump and the deep state are kind of like really like two boxers in this kind of two heavyweight boxers in this 15-round fight, and they're kind of like in the first round, and they're really eyeing each other, and each one wants to deliver the knockout blow, but they're just kind of like realizing that this might work out to be a kind of long 15-round fight, and that's where they are now at the moment. But I think Trump is someone that can really deliver. but on the other hand, the deep state has a lot of power, and they've already removed Michael Flynn from the National Security Advisor position, and so it can go any way. But I think Trump is someone that can turn things around, definitely.
Well, I hope so, because I think it's time for, not just the American people, but the citizens of the world to really know the truth about these, not necessarily even just the programs, but the truth about extraterrestrials and why they're here, and how do we move forward together. And do you think through your whistleblowers, do you think that when you're talking about the priests and then and even government officials, do you feel that the governments or the religions of the world are fearful that when we do know the truth that they might lose their control or power? Is that why, do you think, is that what some of the whistleblowers are saying?
Initially, that was the case, but very recently that has changed dramatically. The Catholic Church in particular has done a lot of things over the last 8 years to put itself in a position to really move forward in a very aggressive way to rebrand itself as a kind of cosmic religion, so that when the truth is revealed, that the Catholic Church will rebrand itself as a kind of religion that is relevant to cosmic life, and that Catholic missionaries will be able to go into the stars to proselytize, which is kind of really wild. But yes, the Catholic Church has presented itself, has rebranded itself, is in the midst of that process, so that after disclosure, they will start recruiting people to begin this kind of Catholic galactic crusade.
Oh, great! I mean, that's awesome, and I'm looking forward to that. I think it's time. I mean, it's been thousands of years that we finally can move forward and find out the truth. Well, unfortunately, we have about a minute left, and I definitely would need you back. Captain Ron was, unfortunately, he couldn't be here. He was upset because he had to be out of town. But I'd love to have you back when he's here, and he's kind of the healthy skeptic, but he has great insight of his own research and stuff. So I'd love to have you back and talk again about more about your book that just came out in February, the U.S. Navy Secret Space Program and Nordic Extraterrestrial Alliance. You can get it on Amazon. I'm sure you can get it on your website, and you go to his website, exopolitics.org. And like I said, this is a fascinating subject, because you get to talk with the people that have been there, they've seen it, and they're trusting their knowledge and their secrets to you. So thank you for sharing sharing their secrets with us, so we can have hope for our future. So, but Michael, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tony, for having me.
Of course. And please, everybody, go to our website, truthbetoldwebtv.com. Check out our YouTube channel. It's just Truth Be Told TV. Subscribe, leave a comment. And if you have any comments for Michael, go to his website. I'm sure you can email him and ask him questions, and hopefully he'll get back to you. So until then, we'll see you next time on Truth Be Told. I'm Tony Sweet. Have a good one.